Welcome to the Builder's Bench, where politics meets construction. I'm Craig Larkins, and this is our final episode before Canadians head to the polls on April 28th. The leaders have debated, the platforms are out, and the race is on. Canadians are already making their voices heard. According to Elections Canada, a record-breaking 7.3 million voters turned out for advance polls from April 18th to the 21st. That's about 1/4 of all registered voters and a 25% jump from 2021. So voters are listening, they're participating. It's great to see. Joining us on the bench today from Ottawa, Louis-Philippe Champagne, Associate Vice President, Public Affairs and Industry Practices with the Canadian Construction Association. From Victoria, we have Chris Atchison, President of the British Columbia Construction Association. And from Vancouver, Jeannine Martin, President of the Vancouver Regional Construction Association. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
Let's get into it. I like to start with the polls, LP. They've pretty much held steady throughout the campaign. Do we see any real movement? We've been talking about from the debates or the party platforms. There was a hope of some action possibly happening. What's your take?
Well, very much so. Things have been shifting a little bit in the last few days. I would preface by saying too little, too late. It's kind of game over already in Ottawa, and you pointed out correctly there by mentioning the advance polling that took place over the weekend. It is an all-time record. 7.3 million votes over the short span of advance polling is massive. In Canada, we tend to forget because population grow pretty fast, but we are already at 40 million Canadians. Out of that, many of them are too young to vote or not eligible to vote. So that's about 30 million voter, give or take, in Canada. Not all of them actually go out to vote. With overall turnout stats of the last few general election, you can expect, give or take, 20, 21 million people to vote by the end of the day on Monday. If 7.3 went out and already casted their vote, that's 1/3 of the vote that is secured, done, right? These people have not only made their mind, they're casted their ballots. Assuming that this was done, similar to the trends that we see in polling, this is a significant amount of support that is locked in for Mark Carney. The most important discussion when it comes to advance polling is also the fact that it is not a homogeneous subset of the population and the voting candidates. It is a very specific type of people that actually will take the time to go out and vote in advance polling. It tends to be a demographic that is slightly older, and in this campaign, it tends to be a demographic that is more aligned to the Liberals. So a very strong turnout for advance polling seems to indicate a good get-out-the-vote effort from the Liberals to secure that vote early. This is probably one of the strongest indicators that Liberals have a pretty strong hedge now to win the election on Monday. Now, I did say in introduction, things are shifting a bit, and that is true. If you look at voting intention, since the debate, things have been shifting around, and the Liberals have been declining quite a fair bit. At the peak on April 9th, Liberals were at 44% nationally, and as of last aggregates, April 24th, we're looking at 42.2%. It's not a massive decline. They're still ahead by a good chunk, but it is a bit of a decline, while the Conservative have been back gaining some traction, now at 38.5. I'll remind you they were at the latest at 36.9, right? So closing that gap between Liberal and Conservative is a reality, but to my earlier point, too little, too late. If 1/3 of the vote are casted, and really we have only 3 days left, it's very unlikely at this point that Pierre Poilievre will pass the Liberal in terms of voting intention. And let's keep in mind, in Canada, that vote distortion strongly favors the Liberal because of these aggregation of seats around Toronto, around Montreal, around Vancouver. There's a lot of people around the urban center that vote Liberal, that vote more progressive, and that conversion of seats from that 44% Liberal into seats still leave them in a very strong projected majority. So if you asked me today, who knows what happened on Monday? Things have the possibility to change, but it seems at this point that the campaign is very much decided.
Have you seen any noticeable changes in voter patterns? We have our typical conservative prairie votes in BC. It fluctuates between conservative and liberals. Is there anything that stood out up until now that kind of surprised you, or has it kind of been status quo when we're talking about percentages and party support?
Quebec is the I would say, interesting dynamic. I would say big surprise is too strong, but Liberals are really doing good in Quebec, which is not something I would have expected. Conservatives currently are below the Bloc Québécois. which is not what they've been used to over the past few years. I know many strong members of the Poilievre team who are projected to become minister if Poilievre would succeed in securing government. They are at risk of losing their own seats in some region of Quebec that have been conservative for a few years, even from the Harper days. Now there seems to have a regain of interest for the Liberals. Keep in mind that Quebec, not all region of Quebec were a big fan of Justin Trudeau. He was a Quebecer. He was speaking very good French, but some region of Quebec didn't like the brand that Trudeau brought in. For some reason, many of the reasons seem to like what Carney has to bring at the table. Quebec is a unique environment when it comes to politics. For decades, the left and right dynamic has been vacated for the political ecosystem because of the national question. I think we're now in a state where things are shifting around. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of success the Bloc Québécois will have, how many seats they will bring to them. If we're not in a minority government, the balance of power is less relevant. But again, the NDP situation is very problematic. Their number of projected seats nationally is lowering by the day. We're now talking about potentially as low as 5 NDP seats Canada-wide. This is going to be the end of the leadership for Jeannine, but also an important reflection for the party itself and their future.
A reboot of sorts, I like to say. All right, let's get into the policies, promises, issues. The start of the campaign, before the writ was dropped, we're seeing a lot of love to the construction industry from all parties, whether it be the more boots on less suits, whether it's the Liberals promising apprenticeship programs. But housing and affordability, of course, was one of the big issues and one of the big topics that came up. We've heard some pretty big, bold promises from all parties with plans to build millions of new homes. They're going to cut the red tape and incentivize municipalities. So, Jeannine, VRCA has 1,000+ member companies. You're definitely ears to the ground on the local level. You've been very vocal about the affordability crisis. So yes, we need to build more homes, but just as importantly, we need to build homes that people can afford to live in.
Yeah, so first of all, I do want to say it's long overdue, this attention to construction and the industry, long overdue, and such a fantastic thing to see. And I'm so proud of the work that Canadian Construction Association, BC Construction Association, and my partner local construction associations have done to elevate our profile on this is very important. And when, election issues are very much linked. Just like construction issues are linked here in BC, we advocated for a minister of construction not to increase the costs of government or government jobs, but to make decision making around construction issues more efficient and effective. And when we think about the housing issue, this is connected to so many other things because delays in construction are delays for everybody and costs for everybody. So not only for the people building the projects and the housing, but the people who need the housing, the people that are coming in to live in the housing, everything that works together. And so this affordability conversation is almost comical, certainly in an economy like Vancouver's. When we look at, I think we've all heard the words about $107,000 a door is a starting point for a home. Add on to that all the other costs that go with it. Like affordable is a joke, I think, and we almost need to reframe that whole conversation. I like the fact that the candidates are looking at this issue and troubleshooting what they can do, but it does seem like a solution will not be shortcoming.
Chris, so how realistic are these federal housing promises when it comes to what's possible in the ground in BC?
Well, just
honest answer.
Yeah, honest answer is not very. I think a couple of things to look at this from the BC perspective, and one thing I wanted to echo LP's comments on the advanced voting, right? And just if we look at that from a BC perspective. It's like a 30% increase just in British Columbians going to the polls. Over 1 million British Columbians cast a vote in early polling, and I think that's up from about 700,000 in 2021. That's just incredible. We've said from the beginning of these podcasts that this is shaping up to be an election of consequence. There's a lot of emotion in this election, and it really is proving to be a fascinating time, and I think people are really taking their right to vote and the urgency around voting unlike anything I've seen in my lifetime, and that's good. That's a good thing for Canada to be going through, and I think for British Columbia to be seeing. But when it comes to what we've witnessed in the past 5 weeks in terms of the campaign promises, and as they relate to construction, and along with Jeannine, I'm just thrilled about how much airtime we're getting and how many commitments are being made to the importance of our industry. That is something that we need to make sure as the leaders of associations that we don't allow the winners and the oppositions that emerge from this off the hook. Because despite their inability, it's going to be an inability to deliver on exactly what they're saying. But we have to also say that, okay, how can they better come to us and put some reality behind what they're saying? So for them to build anywhere between, it's something like 300 and 500,000 homes a year over the next 5 to 6 years, it is a pipe dream. That's just in British Columbia. Currently, we're building about 45 to 50,000 homes a year, so you're looking at increasing that almost tenfold. And in fact, in the last 2 years, we've seen a decline in the number of housing starts for single-family unit and multi-unit residential, which our members are building, down from, I think, in the neighborhood of 45 to about 35. So we're trending in the wrong direction to be able to meet up with a goal that would need us to have tenfold of what's currently being built. Couple that with an acute workforce shortage. Our recent stats have showed us we're in excess of 10,000 workers, a 10,000 skilled worker deficit in British Columbia as we speak. And we've got work to do to draw in a workforce, and we've got a workforce that's going flat out to build the housing and infrastructure needs that we currently have. No employers that I'm talking to is saying we've got more than enough people, there is no worker shortage, even in light of the economy maybe being in a little bit of a neutral place right now. There is still a high demand for skilled workers, and we can't lose sight of that. So, the housing crisis isn't going to be solved on the promises that the Conservatives and the Liberals are making during this election. And I think the outcome, the winner of this election, is going to need to further sit down with industry and understand the realities that are facing the industry and start building longer-term policies that will help to reduce regulatory burdens, help to improve the image and the culture of the construction industry as an occupation of choice, help to reform our immigration system so that it's bringing in high-skilled workers from other parts of the world who want to come and live and work in British Columbia and other parts of Canada. So the talk is cheap, as folks say right now, as they're fighting for the votes, but the real work begins next Tuesday.
And yeah, I do want to dive into the skilled labor shortage a little deeper, Chris, in just a minute or so. But I did want to tee up LP with, and Chris just mentioned, there's so many factors that go into addressing a housing crisis, be it at the municipality level, the provincial level, and the federal level. So are the promises that we're seeing, you can throw out a number of 2.3 million homes, just a number I'm throwing out there. Where are the real gaps and risks from a national perspective when you look at that and when you hear those numbers?
Well, the challenge that remains is the fact that still nobody talks about the core issue, which is municipal infrastructure, right? There's been a number of announcements throughout the past few years. The first Liberal housing strategy back in, 2023, saying we're going to build 5 million homes, but not really explaining how they'll do that. Now we have a more robust strategies in both platforms, really. But the fact remains, if you cut development charges because taxes on home, raise the price artificially, well, then how do you replace the infrastructure that was funded by development charges? What kind of investment stream can you find for government at the federal and provincial level to help fund municipality? And if not, then how do you give municipality capacity to fund themselves? Because fundamentally, sometimes the government is confused in itself, is saying, oh, we'll create a new agency so we'll become a federal developer of housing. That's not what we need. What we need is the ability for the industry and the market to build these homes, and this can't be done until the infrastructure around the homes allows it. We're always talking about streets and house and water infrastructure because that's an easy, visible impact. But there's much more to it as well. The municipal services, the parks, the elementary school in the neighborhood, medical clinics, utility. It takes a village, right? And if we don't do this first, we'll never be able to catch up to that bubble of housing construction. And to Chris' point, like the housing start has gone nowhere but down. And there's a reason for that. It's just because we can't build these homes. It's not because we don't want to.
Do you think that given the amount of noise, I mean, the industry banded together this election and we were heard, definitely, and raised a lot of points. Do you think that that was enough to get a seat at the table in these conversations with whoever that government is next week?
I think regardless of who get elected, the relationship of the industry on Tuesday will be very different than what we've had over the last decade. I'll be blunt. As someone who was a liberal myself for a long time, the Trudeau government hasn't been great at consulting with industries, plural, not just construction. They were very well in line with social group, but not so much talking with the auto sector, with the steel industry, with the construction industry very much. And that became really challenging to convey obvious issue we were having in the workforce shortage, in infrastructure investment, to be sure that they were, paying attention to the real problems. I think this is going to change now, mostly because of a change of leadership. Pierre Poilievre has been more open to work with industry and listen to what's happening. Marc Carney has showcased already in his very new leadership that he's willing to take advice from external group. I think this is going to be a good step, and I'm very hopeful that the next 8 weeks, really, because that's the timeline we have in front of us, will be meaningful for construction in terms of what will be in the speech from the Trome, what will be in budget 2025, and what kind of influence we'll see for the upcoming cabinet and the work of the government.
Well, my hope is that they finally understand what it means when we say it all starts with construction. It literally does. All right, let's switch gears here. Oh, Chris, did you have something you want to say there?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. Thanks.
All right, let's switch gears here. I do want to talk about the skilled labor shortage, so I'm going to steal some of those numbers you mentioned, Chris, courtesy of your stat pack that was provided. So the flip side to building all these homes is who's actually going to build them. Both the Conservatives and Liberals have promised more funding for apprenticeships and support for travel costs and such, but is it enough? So Chris, the latest BCCA stat pack, which you just referenced, 11,000 construction jobs in BC are currently unfilled. Are the party promises bold enough to make a real dent? And we were talking about immigration in our pre-call. If you did want to touch on that.
Yeah, I think the key is going to be the reform to the immigration system. We have to continue to work locally on getting the word out about the high opportunity occupations that exist in construction for our youth, for our Indigenous population, for those that are currently underrepresented in our 95% male-dominated industry. So we have to look at our own communities to try to make sure that the construction sites of the future better represent the community in which they're working. But I think even if all the demographic projections are going to say we still don't have enough people, the aging workforce that we have, and construction is included as part of that, is losing so many people per year that our homegrown talent cannot keep up with the demand of our building needs. So the key for all sectors is going to be through the immigration pathway. And right now, the skilled workers from around the world just can't elevate themselves on Canada's immigration points system in order to be recognized as we would welcome them and recognize them for having the skills and abilities and ambition to want to work and contribute to our construction industry. So I think that while there's some policies that have been indicated that the type of provincial nominee programs and then putting the construction industry on par with urgency as it relates to medical professionals, the talk is there, the indications are there, But in practice, the point system hasn't caught up to what the realities need to be. So this becomes one of those messages where we need to both acknowledge the steps that are being indicated should be put in place, and then we need to also make sure that we reinforce and say, but it's not happening yet, so something needs to change. So I would go back, I think, to LP's point, working with the next government of Canada. This is a critical time. We've lost ground to our colleagues in other countries who have seen the urgency for their own skilled labor shortages, and they have opened up and laid out the welcome mat for skilled newcomers. Canada has not done that. We focused on folks who are already here on temporary permits or as on work visas, but that also sends a message to people who want to choose Canada or who have chosen Canada but have no realistic pathway to get here. So I think for this next cycle is going to be absolutely imperative that we stand together along with our colleagues from other provinces, and we represent the construction industry as being a place that provides high opportunity for Canadian newcomers and a welcome mat for at the doorstep for our new permanent residents that want to come here. We need to make ourselves a whole lot more accessible.
And if we zoom out national, sorry, Jeannine, did you want to?
I was just going to say, as Chris was speaking, I was just thinking, so the policies and the action have not caught up with the urgency of the need. And so we walk around talking about all of these needs. We must have these mandates, other things, but there's no action to support the urgency. So the talk is long and involved, and recognizing it's a game of inches and maybe not of miles, but still it's slow to come. And this recognition, when I look at this, maybe we're at an opportunistic time with the federal government paying so much attention to construction currently, as far as elevating the brand of construction in a way that it makes it more attractive in general. So yes, immigration reform, and not that Chris has spoken very well about that, but also from the grassroots effort from our own internal ability to procure our young people into roles in construction and making that an attractive choice for them early on. I think of that adage, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday, right? Like there's many avenues towards what we're going to need to do to fill this shortage of workers, including immigration reform and building that brand of construction. And as I sometimes say, bringing sexy back to construction. Like construction should be an attractive choice for people when they're choosing a career, whether it be out of school or when they're reinventing themselves someday. Construction is an absolutely great choice. And there are many more things I think these candidates could do to support construction. This is one step, them saying that it's important. It's another step to start showing the importance of it.
Actions speak louder than words. So nationally, LP, that number I pulled from the CCA stat pack sits at 45,000
Correct.
job openings. Did you want to weigh in on that?
Yes, that's a fair point. BC still represent 25% of the vacancies in Canada. It's significant. It's not unsuspected considering the size of the market, but this is 45,000 jobs that we need to fill yesterday in construction. Those are not projected need of the industry or our best case scenario. This is jobs that are open on currently active worksite that are threatened with delays or cancellation due to a lack of workers. I must say on a more positive note that this is significantly better than it was 2 years ago. At the peak of the workforce crisis, we were at 90,000 vacancies. So we're halfway there, and we're getting close to the pre-pandemic average, which was 35,000. This showcased that this issue has been around for a long time. This systemic shortage, especially of trade worker, has been around to a point where we almost got used to it. It's not a reason not to tackle it. And there's a couple things I want to say. On Chris' point, fixing the immigration system is the core solution here. There's no debating, Jeannine, that we need to incentivize Canadians to join the workforce. This is going to be a long-term solution, not something that tackles next year's problem, hopefully the next decade. But the reality is our birth rates are very low in Canada. If you look at the actual growth of the Canadian population over the last decade, it's almost exclusively through immigration to great extents, which bring another very important issue, when we're looking at the housing crisis, one of the main reasons why the federal government has cut down immigration target last year is because they've maybe overachieved a bit too much in the year prior, having 1 million people join Canada out of 40 million Canadians from the immigration on that year. That exacerbated the housing crisis because these people need to live somewhere. And this really showcased the challenge with the immigration system, where the more people we bring that don't contribute to the need of the economy, the worse the situation gets. And that's where the misalignment is most severe. It's not just construction. It's making sure that economic immigration, people we bring in to fill jobs in Canada, actually have the training and credential recognized to fill the job where we need them. And as much as I like teachers and PhD and doctors, this is not where the demand is right now. We need welders, we need carpenters, we need trades workers, and they don't have a proper pathway to get in. So what do we end up? Like in 2023, 1 million more people to house in Canada with no home to give them, and yet very little of them actually contributing to the workforce needed to build these homes. This is the fundamental problem in the misalignment of the system. But this gets worse when you look at retirements, and I think we do need to cover this up. BuildForce make great analysis and forecasts of what's to come for years ahead. And what we know is in the next decade, the retirement that are projected, almost 20% of our workforce projected to retire the next decade, will lead to vacancies and replacement needed of 350,000 people. This is a whole lot of people we need to hire in 10 years, despite the fact that we're already in vacancies. So we have some real question to ask as a country to say, hey, how do we manage to go through that transition of retiring trade workers and construction experts in their 40s and 50s, making sure the new generation comes in, making sure immigration contribute to the solution, and then manage to build more and build better.
Agreed. And, on a positive note, just on reference to the BuildForce data, they did release a number. The number of women in construction did jump by 2,000 in the past year. And I think Jeannine and I were just having a conversation about this yesterday, is that, recruiting doesn't seem to be the problem. It's more retaining people on site and really creating those environments for people to flourish and more of a welcome environment. So, I mean, when you get the government behind you and push behind that, we can do amazing things. Am I wrong?
No.
I want to jump in on that because I think the women in construction and the growth that we might be seeing there is important to recognize. Mm-hmm. And when you look across Canada and you maybe recognize a few more women in construction events and other things that create presence for women in construction. And I think I was speaking to our young construction leaders yesterday about our recent Women in Construction event, and I said, this event is not created to sit around and talk about how women are left out of construction. They're created to create an environment where women can feel included, and it's a solution for the industry. Right? It is an absolute accessible solution or part of a solution for the industry. So women in construction is an excellent target for increasing the brand of construction.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add to that, because I completely agree with where we're going with this conversation, and I think from a standpoint of industry-led solutions, helping to change the culture of the construction industry, which has been battling a stigma dragon for generations about why more women aren't coming into the construction industry, or why construction in general isn't doing a better job of retaining all people who are coming into the industry. But back when we started with our Builders Code initiative, it was something like 50% of women that joined the workforce left within 6 months of their first job. And that's just a horrific retention rate. And fast forward that 6 years to it's our 6th anniversary of Builders Code now, and just subtle things in British Columbia that we're doing. And with our recent industry survey, it was 78% of workplaces have a culture affirming policy in place. That is, to me, astounding. If we go back 5 years, most employers didn't even want to acknowledge that there was a problem with workplace culture. Yeah. Now they are putting policies in place that are addressing bad behaviors on work sites, which would have an adverse outcomes to the retention that they're trying to put in place. So we can't forget that the industry itself is recognizing some of the challenges that it has. And going back to the initial theme, this is what government has to pay attention to is industry is leading the way in a lot of initiatives. And so don't try to solve the problem for us. Please know that construction is like solving problems every day. That is what we do. And as this in the association world, we've come up coast to coast with some amazing initiatives that can be scaled and they can be learned from. And I think that will help solve many of the problems which whoever forms government on Tuesday is going to need to lean into.
The Builders Code is such a great initiative that really needs to be exported elsewhere as well. And it's a case study of great initiative that can be done to have real impact in the workplace. And speaking of diversity, it's important, I think, to mention as well, you were referring to Bill Force number, 210,000 women in the workplace is amazing, but 75,000 Indigenous people is also an amazing news to see that shift in the industry where some might say out of necessity, as we have a workforce crisis, we have the chance to bring people in and realize that this diversity in the workplace have vast potential and benefit to our industry.
Couldn't agree more, LP. All right, we're going to switch gears now. Are you guys ready to talk about the buzzword of this federal election? And it's not tariff.
What is it?
It's infrastructure. I mean, you could put trade infrastructure on it. You could put municipal infrastructure. It's a buzzword that has been in a lot of the announcements and policy platforms that have been announced. So from trade corridors, ports to the sewers, pipes, schools, and hospitals that the growing communities rely on. Jeannine, down here on the ground, we've heard, or in Vancouver rather, we've heard the term growth pays for growth quite a lot. There's a lot of talk of DOC. Do you think the federal parties are addressing the real on the ground issues? We're seeing communities just exploding here in BC alone.
Do I think the government is handling this issue?
Or the current parties, their plan?
In a word, no. In a word, no. I mean, it is one of those issues that has grown to such exponential size. When I try to break it down in my own mind, I can't. I certainly can't take it anywhere productive. What should government do? What should these governments do? I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. And certainly, as you know, we represent the Lower Mainland, and so we're meeting with the municipalities, talking to them about different things to enable infrastructure, enable construction, more on optimizing timelines and strategies to get things done, not necessarily on cost reduction. Because I think that's the issue here, right? There's no way, and with all of the other things that go into construction, all the risk premiums, all the other things that construction companies have to put on projects and products, and we could say tariff, like this is not going down. This is not going down. $107,000 this year is going to be $100,000 next year.
Chris, similar question. Do you think that they're missing the mark? I always go back to the Calgary pipe exploding and just like that scenario, it could happen anywhere. It was of magnitude. And I mean, our communities are growing. Huge towers are going up on the daily. What is your take on, are they missing the mark?
Yeah, I do. I agree. I think that they are, they're saying the right things in terms of the election, run up to the election. Everybody, takes out their dictionary and reminds themselves what infrastructure means. I think we're talking to we're talking to a pretty tight group that lives and breathes with decisions that are made around infrastructure. But I guess when I look at this industry with a lot of pride, I think that investment in infrastructure and investment in the maintenance of current infrastructure is in essence nation building. And that is one of the fundamental necessities of government, is that they should be rising above political rhetoric, and they should be investing in the best interests of this nation. And infrastructure is essential to that conversation. You can't say that you're rising above the political conversations and the backbiting that might take place in Ottawa and not have a vision for Canada. So to have a vision for Canada means that you're investing in infrastructure. And I think when you talk about the need specifically of BC, there's a lot of talk about the seismic needs or the weather events that might be affecting our climate resilient projects that we need to factor in. All of those things have an element of infrastructure and design and planning. So, I think some of these commitments that we've done a good job of laying out both in British Columbia, but nationally through the CCA, is let's try to get the politics out of this. Like what's right for the communities, for the regions, for the nation. And those commitments to long-term infrastructure spending, that, reducing regulatory burden, that just doesn't make sense. And, and I think prioritize those projects that are both going to keep people safe, but give people an indication that we're building a better nation than what we've inherited. And we can't do all of that overnight, but whoever comes to power next week, given what we've invested in our construction for Canadians and how we've elevated the industry to more than a mere speaking point, I think that's how we should continue to aspire to inspire this next government.
There's been a lot of talk of the one-stop shop and the streamlining permitting in regards to infrastructure, one-stop offices for that as well. LP, do you think, we've kind of touched on this through episodes, but I don't think I've directly asked you this. Do you think that we need to remove infrastructure as a political play card?
Good luck with it. You know what the problem is with infrastructure? Infrastructure is like ice cream. It looks good, it tastes good, and it comes in all the flavors, right? And there's nothing like this election to see that. If you look, let's just look at the Liberal platform. I think it's telling, right? $14.5 billion in spending related to construction plan for next year, going up over 4 years to 16.5 in 4 years. You look at that thing, everything talk about infrastructure, yet they're talking about very different subjects that appeal to a different part of the population. Building infrastructure with Indigenous people, 1.3 billion. Critical healthcare infrastructure, 2 billion. Digital infrastructure, 1.5. This is all infrastructure, but you're touching about, digital, that's innovation. Indigenous affair. Okay, healthcare, right? And it goes on and goes on. Municipal infrastructure, college and apprenticeship, housing infrastructure, EV charging. All of that is infrastructure spending. But it's so easy to politicize it because it touched on all the things Canadian cares about. It's a sexy concept. Mm-hmm. In an election like this one, it's good for us. Finally, they care about infrastructure. They're talking about it. Now, the problem is, come Tuesday, will they actually put the money behind that policy? Will that make it to the budget? Are we actually going to see investment flowing into the market? I'm hopeful that they will, because they now, both parties realize it needs to happen, or our economy is going down the shitter. And we have the plan to do so. Now let's make sure that construction is at the table to tell them what to do, when to do it, and how to do it more effectively so that taxpayers' money is used for their best capacity.
Do you think, and I did want to touch on the tariffs briefly, so this kind of segues into it, the whole conversation of trade infrastructure, and that ignited that. Do you think that kind of lended to the conversation of infrastructure when we're talking hospitals, schools, and roadways?
Yeah, no, it for sure does. If there's anything that came out of the crisis that was Donald Trump coming to the White House, it's very much the need for Canada to diversify its dependence to the U.S. The U.S. will always be a close partner. We're not just going to detach and move to Asia. We'll be North America. We'll have the closest and longest undefended border. But the fact is, it can't be our sole trade partner. And in order to diversify, we need access to the Asia-Pacific market. We need access to the European market. And that is done in our coast, in our port, and in the very important road and railroad infrastructure that get goods to the ports. Right? We've seen this first and foremost in 2022 with the supply chain crisis, with the shortage of containers and how the ports were bottlenecked all across the country. This cannot be allowed to happen again, not in a world where we're trying to diversify and make sure we have trade partners that are, in that case, more reliable. I think everybody understands now that this severe investment in trade infrastructure is a necessity. Now, the problem is this needed to happen 10 years ago. And the crisis we're facing is now. We like to think it's all gone because Liberation Day, or so-called Liberation Day, was targeted to the rest of the world, not to Canada. But just yesterday, we've seen that Trump is still talking about Canada. It's still very angry about it. We can't just assume it's going to go away. We need to make action and take action right now.
I'll just jump in for a sec, Craig, because we were in Victoria a few weeks ago meeting with the legislators and talking about several things. And we did meet with our Minister of Infrastructure and talked about trade enabling infrastructure. And she was talking about, the complexity of breaking down the ability to trade across from BC to Alberta and onward. So Chris Atchison, or LP, what I'm seeing now is a CCA-led study of exactly how to break down these trade barriers in an effective way to enable infrastructure. I think that's the next step.
And that red tape that we keep coming back to is such a core problem that we need to find a way to address. Look at poor Port of Vancouver and the trying to expand terminals, and it takes decades to get there. Like, this can't be the solution. Yeah. We need to it doesn't take so long to build, it just takes so long to get it approved. Yeah. Like, are we willing as a nation? Chris pointed it perfectly. Infrastructure is nation building by definition. Let's build our country. Let's build resilience.
Couldn't have said it any better, LP. So before I ask you my final question, we offer some final remarks. Time flies by when you're having a great conversation. We've touched on housing affordability, touched on immigration, skilled labor shortage, and infrastructure. Is there anything else in this campaign that we haven't covered here today that you want to jump on and chat about, LP?
That's a tough one. I mean, tariff remain top of mind. I'm confident, looking at a number, that Mark Carney is heading toward a victory, and I think it's in great part thanks to Donald Trump. I don't think the Republican in the U.S. will appreciate that, but that's what history will remember. There is a number of social issues in the campaign that are relevant, and I think that's why we see such a strong empowerment, especially amongst women, to go out and vote. Which is something we haven't seen as strongly in recent campaigns. So it's easy to lose track when we look very closely at the industry aspect and infrastructure and workforce. But there's so much more at play, right? And Canadians go out to vote over the past weekend and next Monday, thinking about what's better for them, what's better for their kids and their family and the future of Canada. We are at a turning point, and we need to be mindful of that.
Chris, Jeannine, any remarks?
Well, I think I'll just chime in and say, this has been a very interesting run-up to the election for sure. And we're very focused. We've been laser focused on making sure that construction is front and center on this. But I'm keying back to the debate last week in Montreal, the English language debate. And I was struck at the conclusion of it, how cordial the candidates were. They seemed to enjoy each other's company, even though they were bitterly contesting throughout the debate. When it ended, they shook hands. They had a few things to share with one another, and this goes back to there's bigger things at stake here than just who wins next week. And I think, provided that we can continue to show as a nation, again, this is my theme for today. That we can rise above some of the partisan politics that we're seeing in other areas of the world and still distinguish ourselves as a nation. It's a wonderful starting point. There's going to be a lot of bitterness about if the Liberals get another 4 years. I've seen the ads, but at the same time, it's been a fair fight, and whoever wins, Canadians voted for. But I also think Canadians can distinguish themselves as a group that wants to be respectful of the group that wasn't successful, and all of the groups that weren't successful, and find a way to work together to get what we as Canadians need. So to me, I think that's what I look forward to, is seeing how we can galvanize the parties and continue to work during this, despite what we're seeing south of the border, how we'll find a way for all parties to be involved in governing Canada.
Jeannine, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'll just say I just received a text before we got on this call, and it said, "Who is VRCA supporting in the election?" And I said, "Well, VRCA is agnostic." And I'm proud of the position we've taken on this. I'm proud of the information that we've shared with our members. I'm proud of the engagement that the construction industry has shown in this election. We have provided tools across the industry for people to reach out to whatever party they feel most aligned with to get issues important to construction across. And those issues don't change depending on the party. That's the thing. So I'm looking forward to our ability to proudly move forward with whoever is elected, whoever the Canadian people decide to go with, so that we can be productive for construction.
I'm going to pause my final question for you because I do want to talk about what Jeannine was referencing. And it's a nice segue, so thank you, Jeannine. The Construction for Canadians campaign, LP, huge success. Grassroots campaign. Was it 57 associations across the country?
Yes. No, we're quite happy with the turnouts. And
brag about it.
I will for sure. And I'm glad Jeannine went there because you got such a great point there. Our role as an industry association and a network of association is to make sure our members, blue, red, orange, whatever color they so choose, get their voice heard for construction and for what matters for them on their daily life. And that's really what Construction for a Canadian was, an agnostic, non-partisan campaign to make sure that construction issues such as workforce, infrastructure, the important labor that we do, had an impact in the campaign. And I think we've been quite successful looking at platform, looking at announcement, and we could not have done this without you guys, without our local association all across the country, but especially thanks to your members who have come en masse on our website, many thousands of you on the website, many millions of impressions across social media posts all across the country, and many hundreds of people going to our website to send letters to their local candidates saying, hey, my name's Bob, I'm from that riding, and I actually care about construction, you should too. And if you haven't done that, to people listening, please go visit constructionforcanadian.ca. It's going to be up all the way to the election. It's not too late to add your name to the campaign. Make sure you send a letter to your candidates. Make sure that as you go into the poll on Monday, you vote for construction. You vote for what matters.
And I'm sure there's a lot of undecided voters that you were referencing out there, LP, and it is a great resource. So if you are undecided, if you're unsure where to look, if you just want to research, jump on the website. What was it again? Constructionforcanadians.ca?
.ca. You got it.
All
And
right.
further to that, I'll just say, in addition to it giving you content to utilize with as you choose your vote, it also will give you an incredible sense of pride of the industry and what the industry is doing, because the metrics are undeniable in the content.
Yes.
Yes, very much. All right, your final question. It's an interesting one, and I can't wait for the responses. If you could speak directly to the winning party next week, what's the one or two things you would ask them to act on for the construction industry? We'll start with Chris Atchison.
Yeah, this is a tough one. There's so much to choose from. So I think I'll pick three, and one of them ties into a little bit of a BC specific reality that we're on the cusp of having our own prompt payment or payment certainty legislation being brought forward within the next number of months that will bring us in line with Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and of course the Construction Act in Ontario, which sort of kicked it all off. The federal government also has their own form of prompt payment legislation, and I think that may be part of the conversation as we talk about removing trade barriers and harmonizing a nation when it comes to some interdependence around the construction industry. They could put their thumb on the scale to other provinces to maybe make everybody sing from the same song sheet when it comes to payment certainty and overall health of the construction industry. So I think that as they might think that the work has been done, but I think as they continue to turn their attention towards the needs of the construction industry, there is still a little bit more leverage that they can lean on other provinces to make sure that they're moving in this direction somehow. Not asking for perfection, but just progress. I think we also need to continue to hold the federal government to account on skills-based immigration, on a skills-based immigration system that works for the real labor market needs of Canadians and of the construction projects that are going to be in demand across this country under the next government. So, maybe I'll stop there and probably just throw in, and part of that needs to be long-term infrastructure planning outside of election cycles. Just let's get the politics out of this and let's start building for the sake of nation building. So they're saying the right things right now in all of their platforms as far as construction goes. But what I think we've talked about during this call and during this podcast is the lack of practical detail on the how they're going to get it done. So they're being ambitious. They're trying to claim power, but execution is going to matter. And so the winning parties are going to need to listen to the subject matter experts when it comes to building and maintaining critical infrastructure, addressing our housing supply and our workforce shortage, and those solutions. And industry is the expert. And many of their solutions are not going to be developed in the offices on Parliament Hill. The solutions must come from industry. Industry is leading the way on lots of these solutions now, so engage. And not performative engagement, but decision makers need to be fully informed about what we're doing and the realities on the ground. So once the election's over, come up for breath and start listening to those subject matter experts who are in the field and who can help you do your job.
Well said. Jeannine, if you were sitting across from the future PM and his cabinet was behind him,
Yeah. So
what are you going to say?
I've just jotted down my words, which I will then be emailing to my candidates after. But, I think maximizing infrastructure investment and giving industry the ability to respond by providing policies that support the urgency of the needs. So I think that encapsulates much of what we talked about here, which is industry is happy to solve these challenges with you. Don't put barriers in our way and give us the information we need to support the infrastructure building.
Nice. LP, final thoughts.
I think those were great policy points. I'll be more operational in nature. If I'd be back into PMO, I think I'll tell my boss, bring the House of Commons back as soon as possible. You need to form a government by mid-May. Otherwise, we're toast. I would say bring in budget 2025 and make sure that your policy commitments are in there, that you show Canadian that you were not messing around and you're willing to do things. And as construction, I would say stop discriminating against subset of the industry. This is not just about Toronto. It's not just about Ontario. It's about all of Canada. It's not just about trade workers. It's about GC. It's not about vertical. It's about all of current construction, vertical and horizontal. It's about union and open shop. It's about the entire ecosystem that need to be supported by good policies that transcends the boundary of what construction may be seen from region to region.
Nice. Well said. All right, that was quite the conversation. Our next episode is actually going to be on April 29th. It is a results and reaction episode, so please do tune into that. April 28th is the big day. You have lots of time to vote from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. You are allowed to leave work to vote, and I believe back in the day when I was working on campaigns, they'll actually give you a ride too, so there's lots of ways to get to the polls. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris, Jeannine, and LP, and we will be back here on April 29th.
See you then.
See you then. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Craig.